Hi everybody, welcome to Leon's Chainsaw Parts and Repair. Happy weekend. Got a little bit of time I can spend here in the garage before we go to my youngest's birthday party. She turned 5 on Thursday, so we waited until today to do a little pool party for her. So a bunch of 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds running around a pool screaming. It should be interesting. So we're looking at a Farmsaw. And no, this is not a Homelite. You can almost accidentally maybe mistake it for one if you just look at the orange and think, it's a faded Homelite, but it's a Pioneer. And I would assume, based on the orange, I don't know Pioneer's history that well, but they at some point merged with partner saws, and after a while they ended up wearing the partner label more prominently, and they had that kind of, it's a yellow, mustard yellow, whatever the heck it was. I'm assuming that there is already a merger between the company when this orange came about, but I don't know. Doesn't really matter. This saw, I think, 81 was when it was produced. Anyway, yeah, it's not a Homelite. Every once in a while I do stray from the Homelite stuff. I had a friend from Canada who's getting out of the chainsaw collecting business contact me a month or so ago and sent me a ton of pictures of his saws. And 2 or 3 years ago, a lot of those Canadian saws, he's in Canada, I didn't have and I would have needed, but these days I've picked up quite a few more of them. But Homelite saws only. I have been looking at these Pioneer farm saws for a while and thought, well, it'd be neat to run one. Anyway, I've got it here. You can see it's torn apart. Got a leaking crankshaft seal. I got some of those on order. So I'll have to wait to do a final test run. It'll rev out good. The idle's just inconsistent. It tends to load up and die out with where I've got to richen it up to make it run right. So yeah, boy, what an interesting, their worm gear that they use to drive the oil pump is basically just a damn spring that's coiled up on here, and getting it on and off is not fun. In fact, I have no idea, now that it's off, what I'm going to do I think I can press it back in place, but basically to get it off, I just spin the saw over with a screwdriver and a washer under there and tink a little bit, 180, tink, pain in the neck. Wasn't happy about it. But the bigger issue that this saw had, and Jeff had told me that he thought there was a problem with the coil, had the wrong coil on it, and I'm pretty sure I know why and what was going on. And it's a bigger issue out there in the aftermarket that I've kind of seen developing, and going to address it a little bit now. There's a number of companies that are selling a reproduction coil for the Super XL Homelite, and it is known, or at least stated fairly commonly on the web, that these farm saws, and probably what the P41 and P42, if I'm remembering correctly, Pioneers, use the same coil as a Homelite Super XL. And I would say that's 99% true. I think the coil legs are just a little bit different, and I'll tell you why. Came with this coil on it. Now this is clearly brand new from the aftermarket. And you can notice that this back of the coil leg has been heavily modified in order for it to fit the flywheel, or to gap it to the flywheel properly. This is a Super XL original Prestolite coil, a blue coil, so Wico Prestolite. Typically in Homelite fashion, the black coils were Phelon, at least from, let's say, around 1980 on up. The points coils, that was a different issue, but if you were looking at electronic ignitions, typically Phelon was black and the Wico Prestolites were blue. Those don't interchange. I've had Super XLs way back in the day when I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I mixed up for my dad the flywheel. I think the flywheel was for a Wico, and the coil that I put on was a black Phelon. And I actually could get the thing to run. It was a pain in the butt, and it was really tough to get running. But once it did run, it sort of seemed okay. But I knew something was wrong, and come to find out, I had mixed those up. So this saw would not run on this coil. It would fire, but it was clear the timing was off. And the reason I say that is it would try to start, but then it would die, and there was a big puff of unburned fuel coming out of the exhaust every time. And I had already double-checked the carburetor and all that, knew it was not that, knew the flywheel key was good. So I thought, what the hell? Pull this off, pulled out one of these that I had laying around. What do you know? It fired right up. So, number one, if you're working on one of these farm saws, or again, I think P41, P42, maybe others from that era would have used a Wico electronic setup, be very careful what coil you're going to put on there. So that leads to the second part of what I was talking about earlier, and the aftermarket coils that are being produced out there, there's a good many of them that are black. And I've had a number of customers come to me and say they were referred to me by somebody that they had bought a coil from. When they bought the coil, it wouldn't work. They contacted the seller. The seller said, well, I don't know why it wouldn't work. Referred them to me. And in several cases, I've had to refer them back to a used coil, and then their saw takes off and runs right. So I guess this long-winded bunch of baloney is my personal speculation, is I believe that at some point somebody got a hold of a Phelon electronic ignition coil that looks, well, exactly like this, and made some reproductions under the assumption that they were all the same. And unless you have a Phelon flywheel, it's not going to work right. Now, obviously they made those, but there's not that many of them out there, because I don't think it was standard up until 86 or 87. The memos talk about it, the service memos somewhere. But when you think of how many Super XLs were run with that coil versus this blue one, I mean, it's got to be 5-to-1 in favor of the blue, at least would be my guess. So there's not that many flywheels out there. Now, I have no idea if the Homelite flywheel would even bolt up to this. It wouldn't work, simply because this uses a ratchet style starter, just like the 330 does. So, yeah. Be careful with what you're buying in the aftermarket. There's only one source aftermarket that I know for an absolute fact has it right. And on eBay, they go by Standard Magneto, and that appears to be the company that has purchased Wico, Prestolite, whichever name was most commonly used. They own them. They have the original specs for these blue coils, and they have been selling those under a new production run. The last time I looked, they were $54 shipped to your door. That's not bad. Homelite was charging almost twice that much for one of those coils back when you could still get them from them. So, anyhow, that's kind of what I think is going on. So if you've got a farm saw, got a bum coil, you find the old blue guy isn't producing spark, don't throw it away. There's something you gotta try first. We've talked about this before. I've got my toaster oven tucked away under here. Take that coil, it's real easy to unscrew the spark plug wire, just spin it out, and set this with the metal lamination on the rack of a toaster oven or something that'll get to roughly 180 to 200 degrees, and cook it 6 hours. I've done it to a ton of these coils and brought them back. Now, I've heard from some folks that they'll cook one and it'll last for 6 months to a year and lose spark again. Well, okay, pull it off and cook it again. You know, that's not a big deal for me. But more importantly, don't throw away this lamination. Even if you buy one of the aftermarket coils from Standard Magneto, you're going to need your old lamination, because this does not bolt up exactly right in order to match the flywheel. The one that I put on there, I had to modify just a little bit to get the right gap. And where I had to modify it was this back leg. I needed the hole to go up and out just a little bit more. So that makes that lamination pretty thin at that point. I only removed about 1/8 of an inch of material, but that's a lot of material when you don't have a lot of clearance to play with. So if you're going to replace it, press this lamination out. All you've got to do is pry this little retainer up. And I'm not going to go all the way, but you can see how that's moving up. Then you can press this lamination completely out. So save your old lamination and press it into whatever new coil you're going to use, which again should be either a new one of these from Standard Mag or one of these that's used from a Homelite that's working, so that it'll bolt up right in here and you won't have to screw around trying to file that out. Again, I'm not an ignition expert, but what I've read, the reason that the Phelon and the Wico are not interchangeable is the polarity of the flywheel magnets is reversed between the two companies. So the way it triggers the coil is completely backwards, and therefore that's what causes your timing to be all whacked out. So I know that was long-winded, but hopefully it'll save folks a little bit of hassle down the road working on some of these. Back to the saw in general, I mean, this thing looks really nice. Starter's plastic, so it's got some discoloration in there. I'll be able to clean some of that up with a plastic restorer, but some of it is what it is. I'm not going to lose any sleep about it. The metal painted parts, I mean, this is all metal. The gray is in great shape. The orange is in pretty damn good shape. I've got the chain brake out back there. It's probably the most weathered of all the pieces in terms of fading on the paint, but it's nothing that a little bit of the, I'm using the Meguiar's professional line of wax with the fine cut cleaner and all that stuff, so you can really restore the paint well. I've got a replacement air filter cover coming. The tab that's on the back here is busted off, so this will kind of waller around. Not gonna put up with that. The fuel cap was missing, and boy, wouldn't you know, that's a hard part to find, but I'm using a cap for the moment off of one of the early Homelites that, you know, the thread is probably not quite right, but it's just enough that it'll keep the gas in and I can test run it. These mufflers are pretty neat. If you guys haven't ever looked at them, this is all kind of a modified downdraft muffler. Giant chamber with just a big baffle, kind of oval shaped baffle and spark arrestor in there, and then just, so it has a, doesn't sound totally like a boat motor, but it definitely has a more piped sound with an outlet like that. What else? That's about it. Clutch was in great shape. Has not been used that much. There's barely any wear inside the drum here, and the teeth are still looking pretty good, so I'm not going to do much with that. I'm just going to wait for that crank seal to get here, pound that thing into place, and yeah, we'll do a test run video. Okay, it's easily been 2 weeks or more since I made the first part of this video. I've got the crank seal installed over here. Due to a stupid mistake, I'm now waiting for parts for a new clutch to come in. That big washer needs to cover that up before you start it the first time. Otherwise, your clutch explodes and goes flying, and more than likely he's going to break a shoe like I did. So, like I say, dumb mistake there, got in too big of a hurry. But it does seem to be running good, and I think I've got it basically tuned with that new seal. not bad. Not bad at all. Let me grab the chain brake. This part still needs a little cleanup. Actually, the whole saw still needs the customary wax and all that junk. But, come on, baby. There we go. That is what this beautiful saw is going to look like. The other thing I did replace, the tang on the back of the air filter cover here is long gone. It indexes down to the throttle handle. So I replaced it with a good used one, and actually this one has a better decal. So, pretty stoked about that. Oop. Anyway, there we go. Pioneer farm saw going into the collection. And now, like a dummy, I found something else I need to collect. Because if you got a farm saw, you almost have to have a farm saw too. So look forward to that in the future.